friends. I hope you enjoyed a nice long weekend, and this week we have a nice short week of school. Now, the reason why we had a long weekend is because it was President's Day. And even though we have had now 46 presidents, really for President's Day, we honor two important presidents. We honor George Washington, our first president, and also Abraham Lincoln, who's also a very, very important president. Now, I found a new book that I wanted to share with you guys. It is called Dancing Hands, How Teresa Carreño Played the Piano for President Lincoln. And this is a true story about a girl who is what I would consider to be a prodigy. Okay, and a prodigy is someone who is a genius. They are just amazingly good at something. And this young girl, she is a piano prodigy. And she grows up in Venezuela and then comes to America, and eventually she plays piano for President Abraham Lincoln. And we do also learn about some of the tough things that were going on both in her country and in our country as well. And it's a really nice story. So, Dancing Hands. This is written by Margarita Engel and Rafael Lopez. So, Dancing Hands. When Teresa was a little girl in Venezuela, Mama sang lullabies while Papa showed Teresa how to let her happy hands dance all across the beautiful dark and light keys of a piano. At first, making music seemed magical, but Teresa soon learned that playing a piano could be hard work. Sometimes she had to struggle to make the stubborn music behave as she practiced gentle songs that sounded like colorful birds singing in the dark and light branches of a shade-dappled mango tree, and powerful songs that roared like prowling jaguars beside towering waterfalls in a mysterious green jungle. If Teresa felt sad, music cheered her. And when she was happy, the piano helped her share bursts of joy. By the time she was 6, she could write her own songs. And at 7, she performed in the peaceful chapel of a magnificent cathedral, playing hymns that shimmered like hummingbirds. Music was Teresa's delight, but suddenly when she was 8, a war changed everything. Guns blazed, swords flashed, and poor Papa had to rush the whole family down to the seashore and onto a ship, into a storm where wind howled, waves rolled, barrels tumbled, ropes snapped, and clouds bucked and kicked across the wild sky like angry mules. By the time the ship arrived in New York, Teresa felt lost. She was homesick. How could she ever play happy songs again in this unfamiliar country where she didn't know a single friend? Few people spoke Spanish, and all around her, curious strangers stared and whispered, as if her whole family belonged in a museum of oddities. Worst of all, there was fighting here too. The horrible Civil War. North battling South as soldiers marched and newspaper boys hollered about victories, defeats, funerals, and fears. And this is what was going on in our country at this time in the 1860s. This was a horrible, horrible war, my friends, in which the north part of our country was fighting with the south part of our country, and it was just not a happy time, we'll say. Without a new piano, Teresa would have felt even more lonely. But soon she discovered that wherever one is, some people are friendly, drawn together by songs. Musicians came to her home, playing along while they listened to the dazzling notes of her dancing hands. Determined to improve, Teresa practiced graceful waltzes and sonatas, booming symphonies, and lively folk songs of her strong hands accepting the challenge of life's many dark and light moods. People began to call her the Piano Girl. Her picture was in the newspapers and on posters advertising concerts where she performed with great orchestras that invited her to play solos. Teresa triumphed in enormous theaters where children clapped and cheered while their parents stood up and tossed roses. With Papa at her side, she traveled to elegant cities, and by the time she was 10, the piano girl grew so famous that she received amazing invitations, including one so special that she could hardly believe her eyes. President Abraham Lincoln wanted her to play for his whole family at the White House. But the country was still at war, so Teresa arrived in Washington, D.C. at a time when freed slaves were signing up to be soldiers. The injured moaned and nurses groaned from the sheer weariness of caring for so many fevers and wounds. Not long ago, the president's young son had fallen sick and died. Men argued about battles lost, battles won, speeches made, victory delayed. Teresa began to worry. How could music soothe so much trouble? Poor Abraham Lincoln. Teresa hoped she could entertain the president, his grieving wife, and their 2 surviving sons. Her fingers might stumble to the rhythms emerging too fast or too slow. But Teresa was brave, and she believed in trying her best. So she entered the White House silently, clutching Papa's hand fiercely as they stepped into a room so red that it looked like a storm or a sunrise. Teresa remembered how it felt to be a homeless refugee and how lonely she had been surrounded by strangers, some of them rude and others kind. The memory of meeting past challenges now helped her fingers dance, celebrating the way life had turned out to be a mixture of all sorts of feelings, happy and sad. But the piano was poorly tuned, making her music sound ugly. What should she do? Refuse to play? She stopped, feeling discouraged, until Mr. Lincoln smiled kindly and asked for his favorite song, Listen to the Mockingbird. Teresa knew she could play this lively piece even on an imperfect piano, so her fingers leaped across the glorious dark and light keys, improvising the way mockingbirds do, the melody changing as she went along. Music swirled, twirled, and soared on wings of sound. The president listened quietly to notes that rose, swayed, rippled, and dipped like a bird in the blue sky above a green forest. He closed his eyes, nodded his head, stretched his long fingers, and tapped the tips of his shiny shoes. When the joyful song ended, Abe Lincoln stood up and clapped, smiling at the piano girl, who smiled too, because she knew that her music had brought comfort to a grieving family, at least for one brief, wonderful evening of dancing hands. From then on, Teresa felt certain she would always be bold enough to share her musical courage anywhere in the world, simply by letting her fingers travel across all the beautiful, dark, and light moments of hope. All right, and then at the end they tell you about Teresa Carreño, who was a very well-known piano player and composer during that time. All right, friends, so, even when times are tough, and we'll say right now, some of us are going through some tough times. Music is often a way that we can bring ourselves together and we can get through tough times. So, if you're having a tough time, listen to your favorite song. Sometimes that could put a smile on your face. All right, friends, I hope you enjoy a nice short week. I am not giving you an assignment that needs to be turned in. I'm just giving you a document with some different links. I have actually a song that I found that was composed by Teresa Carreño, so you can learn a little more about her. And that's it for this week. Have a wonderful week, everybody.